So, good evening. Welcome to this series of four on empowering the family physicians on how to handle medical problems during pregnancy. We know that pregnancy is a very sensitive stage where any medicine we give can harm the child, the fetus, as well as the mother. If women having some medical issues before pregnancy or developing during pregnancy needs very good care from the practitioner side. And this is another area where we are being taken over by gynecologists. So I think it is imperative that we learn this on our own. Today being the first session, we have decided to devote it to preconception counseling or preconception planning. I agree that a lot of pregnancies do occur spontaneously or accidentally, but many patients, couples plan a pregnancy, and that is the time the family physician can come forward and suggest that you have to first ensure that you are fit to conceive, fit to carry the pregnancy to full term, and for that your advice certain basic tests will be required. After Alka ma'am does the part of counseling, I will be talking on how we as a family physician can evaluate a couple's fertility. You will agree that most of the couples today are starting to think of pregnancy quite late, and when they go to a gynecologist, the first thing that is offered is assisted reproduction. So our insight into pregnancy, fertility, how we can evaluate our couple, make sure what is wrong with them, or if nothing is wrong with them, then I'll be talking on evaluation of fertility, common tests done, common treatments given. So let me invite Alka ma'am. Alka ma'am needs no introduction. So Alka ma'am will start the talk and I will be taking the second part.
Okay, we are going to talk about preconception counseling. Now, here I am showing you a sentence which says, first prove your fertility, then go for contraception. And you all must be wondering what a strange statement is this. First prove your fertility, then go for contraception. I take you back when I was in second MBBS and we were posted in Kama Hospital for our first gynec obstetric term. And in those days in Kama Hospital, only the girls were allowed and ladies were allowed. So our batch was full of, we were about 10 girls, and a couple came anxious for the child. Our teacher took the history, examined her, gave her advice, and when the couple left, the couple was married for 7 years. For first 5 years, they were observing contraception, family planning that they had observing. And now for last 2 years, they were trying for a child and they couldn't succeed. Therefore, they had come to our teacher. When the couple left, madam turned to us because we were all girls. She told us, when you get married, first prove your fertility, then go for contraception. We didn't understand the meaning of this sentence at that stage. But as the days went by, I started more and more learning about the human life. Past MBBS, started my medicine. In the medicine, I saw a large number of patients coming with different problems. And slowly, I started understanding the meaning of this sentence. There are a large number of people who have misconceptions about it. Large number of the people take pregnancy for granted. As if, yes, it is a physiological phenomena, no doubt, but it is not so easy. Nature is not so kind to each and everyone. And therefore, there are large number of couples who must be coming to you also, that initially they go on Google, they search something, they hear something, they follow some contraception method, and after that, when they want the child, they are in trouble. And under that stressful condition, they come to you. And therefore, what my teacher said in 67, 68, stands even to today. First prove your fertility, then go for contraception. And who will tell this to the newlyweds? The family physician. Parenthood. What is parenthood? Parenthood is an instinct. Instinct is something which is inborn. Okay, there are 6 instincts with which we are born. Just to give you an example, hunger is an instinct. If we are starving for 4 days, whatever comes before me, I am going to eat it because I am hungry. But if I am well fed, I will not eat anything which I don't like. Then I will look at the color, the flavor, the aroma, the the locale, everything, the ambience, and then I will eat it. That is appetite. So there is a difference between hunger and appetite. Hunger is an instinct. So parenthood is an instinct. Every woman and man, they want to be parent. It may be a heterosexual relationship, and nowadays you also see so many gay people becoming fathers and so many lesbians becoming mothers. So parenthood is an instinct. Procreation or reproduction, this is an instinct given by the nature to all the human beings. For what? For the propagation of the race. Okay? So this is nature which has endowed it on us, and therefore we should not interfere with the nature. If we interfere with the nature, we are facing what we are facing today. That's what they are saying. Corona is because of our interference and indulgence, encroachment on the nature. Let us keep it aside. So parenthood is an instinct. Procreation is for propagation of the race. The woman and the man want to be a mother and a father. Now when we talk about creation, the creation has to be something, it's a new creation. And we all want our creation to be beautiful, to be healthy. So creation has to be healthy. And if it has to be healthy, the partners must be physically and psychologically healthy. If they are healthy, then the creation will be healthy. If they have a problem, the creation will have a problem. And therefore, see, parenthood, as I said earlier, that we take it for granted. वो माँ बनने वाली है, वो बाबा बनने वाला है. But they, without realizing the responsibilities of the parenthood, we really talk very loosely about it. So we must have the mother, the father, the prospective mother and the father who are physically and psychologically healthy. They must be prepared for parenthood to carry out their responsibilities, and therefore there is a need of preconception counseling. And who can counsel these newlywed couples? The family physicians. When we are talking about pregnancy, we have to consider 3 things. We have to consider the mother, we have to consider the obstetric outcome, we have to also consider, that is the focus, our fetus or the newborn. What is the present scenario? Present scenario, we are seeing that most of the youth, they are career oriented. They may be doing chota mota job, but still they call it as a career. Now it's very difficult for us to define career. But even if they are doing some clerical job, no, my career is first. And therefore, the marriageable age is advancing. The same thing is happening in the rural area for different reasons. Because we are reading in the newspapers that because of the girl feticide, they are not getting the bride. And therefore, the men are advancing in their age because they are not getting married. They are not getting a girl. This is all you must have read. This is what is happening, and we have to face this stark reality. So career-oriented youth, or because of the social problems, the age of the marriage is advancing. There are late marriages. Now, if there are late marriages, what is the problem? The problem is with the late marriages, the fertility in India is decreasing. You know, a woman is born with a finite numbers of the ovum, and therefore there will be finite numbers of menstrual cycles. Compared to the Europe or America, our menopausal age is earlier. So the ovarian reserve in our Indian women is less compared to the Western world. So the age of fertility is lesser than the Western world. And therefore, we always advise that get married at a proper age, but have a child before the age of 30. Because if the age is advancing, then the congenital problems increase in the fetus. To avoid these problems or complications of pregnancy, they are also more when there is an advanced stage of the mother or even father. And therefore, once you get married, don't postpone the pregnancy, and that is the problem with the late marriages. So after the whatever age that you get married, first prove your fertility. Who will give this advice? In olden days, when there used to be joint families, the elderly people used to give this advice. The grandparents or the mother, she used to tell the daughter about the marital life, about the nuances of this, and then about the pregnancy. But now with the nuclear families, their teacher is Google. And you know what knowledge that they get from the Google? There is no experience in the Google. There is only some information. There is no wisdom. It is an information. And from this information, these people make their own opinions and behave. There is also increasing substance use. More and more use of tobacco, alcohol, and recreational drugs. Tobacco use in the rural area is very common. They chew tobacco very commonly. Even in urban areas, that maid servants who come to our house, they are all the time chewing tobaccos. That is one way. Second is masheri is very common in the rural area. Third, the low class women, they are smoking either bidis or cigarettes. Not cigarettes, but bidis. But in metros, what I find nowadays, that every nook and corner, there will be a group of young people, the boys and the girls. The boys are standing there to give company to the girls, and the girls are happily smoking away. The incidence of smoking is rapidly increasing in the women all over the world, and more so in the developing countries. The same thing holds true about alcohol. There was a time in our when we were in the college, or even up till now, we never talked about alcohol in our house. Of course, I am a teetotaler, but even then it was forbidden because it was not a practice in the middle class. But today it has become a ritual even in middle class. The girls and boys are taking to alcohol very rapidly, and then there is no control. And the same thing is recreational drugs. I hardly knew about these recreational drugs, but nowadays I am learning quite a lot about recreational drugs from the TV media, as you all must be. And therefore, there is a need for preconception counseling. And this preconception counseling, when is it to be done? To the newlywed couple. There are medical implications of this preconception counseling. This PC is for preconception counseling. What are the medical indications? That appropriate immunization, of prospective parents. Both father and the mother have to be adequately immunized in order to prevent some of these infectious diseases in the fetus or the child. Treatment of pre-existing chronic conditions in would-be parents, like diabetes. Now, diabetes has assumed epidemic proportions in India. Type 2 diabetes is very common. Every fourth Indian is diabetic. Similarly, type 1 diabetes is also increasing. And this has to be controlled before the pregnancy. Otherwise, we are going to discuss this. There will be deleterious effects on the mother, on the obstetric outcome, and on the fetus. So type 1 diabetes, type 2 diabetes has to be controlled. Hypertension. Hypertension, when you detect detected during the pregnancy, we are perplexed whether it is a pregnancy-induced hypertension or it is essential hypertension. So therefore, if it is pre-existing, it has to be controlled. Valvular heart diseases. A person may be absolutely asymptomatic and doesn't even know that he has some valve problem. And if it is there, we have to correct it. Now there are so many methods, the technology is so advanced, and therefore we can have a healthy, fit and fine mother or the father if they are having a valvular heart disease. Forget valvular heart disease, a congenital heart disease like ASD, atrial septal defect. It remains asymptomatic for a very long period. And therefore, if it is there, it can come, accidentally it is detected when the person comes for this counseling, and that is to be treated. Asthma is another common problem. There are quite a few patients who are on anti-epileptic drugs. There could be infections, like a person is taking anti-TB drugs or some other infections. Similarly, thyroid dysfunctions. They affect the mother as well as child. And therefore, from medical point of view, the need of preconception counseling is to examine the prospective parents for all these medical conditions. Then there is a risk reduction of inherited genetic disorders. There are certain genetic disorders which run in the family. We all know about sex-linked disorders like hemophilia. The woman is a carrier, so the mother is carrier and her brother is a sufferer. The females are carriers and males are sufferers. So when it is sex-linked, the mother is a carrier, her daughter will be a carrier, but her son will be a sufferer. Same thing about Duchenne's myopathy. Okay, that is also sex-linked, and therefore the sufferer is the boy, while the carrier is a female, the mother. And therefore we have to ask for the history of any such disorder in the family. So for the prospective mother, we have to ask if there is any hereditary problem in her brothers, in her mamas, and things like that. So we have to take the history of the family tree. There can be genetic disorders which are autosomal recessive. If they are autosomal recessive, like if mother and father has a sickle cell trait, then the offsprings will have sickle cell disease. The same thing is true about thalassemia. The autosomal recessive disorders, the incidence or prevalence increases if there is a consanguineous marriage. Similarly, some of these hemoglobinopathies are common in certain communities. Okay, and therefore we have to be knowledgeable about it. We have to ask the history about it. If there is anybody having sickle cell trait in the family, thalassemia trait in the family, or if there is a consanguineous marriage, all this history needs to be taken. So this is again a part of preconception counseling. What I talked was a medical part of preconception counseling. It could be a psychological need. Because as I said, all of us are nowadays go on Google and collect the information. Whether it is right or wrong, we don't know. But therefore, many of these people carry misconceptions regarding pregnancy, labor and breastfeeding. We have certain vague ideas about our beauty, about our body shape and things, so on and so forth. Then we have a fear about labor pains. So there are a lot of misconceptions which have a psychological impact on these prospective parents. There are peer pressures from the both the sides, the mother's side and the in-laws side. Apart from that, there is a peer pressure from the friends or the office colleagues. And all this pressure is indirectly acting on the psyche of these parents. Anxiety, depression, and then psychologically addictions, alcohol, tobacco and substance abuse. Let us not forget about increasing use of alternate medicine. Just a word of caution about it because I don't know much about alternate medicine. Addictions. Several drugs may be used simultaneously. Alcohol is one, but under the effect of alcohol, they can indulge into many other recreational drugs. As we have been seeing on the TV, I need not go into the history, but this is becoming very common. What is the effect of these recreational drugs or these addictions? There is a malnutrition. There is a poor maternal health. There is a vulnerability to infections. There is anxiety. There is psychological instability. And all this will have deleterious effects on the fetus. It was Chasnov. This paper is published in Neurotoxicology and Teratology. Remember that all these drugs can have teratogenic effects. And he had estimated 350,000 to 7 lakh fetuses in utero may be exposed to illicit substances each year, adversely affecting neonatal and infant growth and the development. So we have to take the history of this. Alternate medicines are used in all the countries, not only in India, all the countries, even in America, even in England. But the use is maximum in developing countries, in the African continent, subcontinent, in India, I mean all these developing countries, because maybe they are affordable or because we have faith in them. But indigenous medicines are used. They are not regulated by FDA. Their ingredients are not known to me. I am a modern medicine person, so I don't know the ingredients. There is lack of clinical trials, and therefore we don't know the side effects of these drugs. We don't know drug-drug interactions about these drugs. There is a paucity of safety data. In modern medicine, every drug will give you a safety category, pregnancy category A, B, and C. That is evidence-based. And therefore, they will tell us that this drug is teratogenic. This drug, the effects are not known, so it is not safe to be used in pregnancy. Now, when I don't know about these drugs, if my client or if the couple which has come to me for consultations, if they ask me questions about this, I should be polite enough to admit my ignorance about it. I will not be biased, prejudiced, or I will not give judgmental opinion, but I'll only say that I don't know about it. You please consult the expert about these medicines. Recently, you know, so many cases, litigations are happening because of somebody said something that by saying this mantra or by doing this practice, you can get a male offspring. Immediately, he was pulled to the court. And therefore, we have to be safe even from litigation point of view. So whatever is known to us, we will say. If I don't know, I will say I don't know. Please consult the experts. So who should do the counseling? And in my opinion, family physician is the best counselor, because family physician treats a newborn to a great grandparent in that family. So he knows the familial problems. He knows the disorders which are running in the family. He knows certain idiosyncrasies or allergies in that family, and therefore family physician is the best counselor. Now, before he embarks on counseling, let me just revise what is counseling. Counseling is not an advice. आपके पास उपदेश लेने के लिए कोई नहीं आया है. So it is not an advice. It is not a health education. The health education he is getting rightly, wrongly from the Google. So counseling is not an advice. It is not a health education. It is that you have to understand the problem of the client. Don't show sympathy. They don't want a sympathy. It has to be an empathy. So you understand the problem with due empathy. Be non-judgmental. Suppose if a young boy and a girl walks in and they tell me that we are in live-in relationship and now I am pregnant or I want to get a child from him, I have come for your advice. Immediately, if I flare up and say, go to hell, first get married and then only produce children, it is wrong. That is their choice. they are in live-in relationship and they want to be parent. So be non-judgmental. We should keep our prejudices, biases away, that is to ourselves. But when a person comes for counseling, be non-judgmental. Give full information, whatever you have. You answer all their questions very nicely, comfortably. If you don't know, admit that I don't know, I will check and tell you. But don't give any false information or incorrect information. So what is counseling? So we give all this information and we give them whatever options which are available for them, for their problem. So we help the client to make his or her own decision. So we are not decision maker. Therefore we don't advise, we don't educate, we give them full information. Medical aspects, psychological aspects, social aspects, everything we discuss, and then let them, these are the options for your problem and you decide what you want to do. So decision is theirs. So preconception counseling, as a counselor, you need to be introduced to some of the counseling techniques. And what is the counseling techniques? Simple things. We all do that. Up till now, we used to say we are reassuring the patient. There is a difference between reassurance and counseling. So when we are doing counseling, these are the techniques. I'm just briefing them. Now, if a client comes to you and he wants to discuss, now he is going to discuss about the conception. The conception will revolve around the sex and the sexual problems. Now, when he is going to tell you something very sensitive or very confidential from his or her life, he will not open up easily, and therefore you have to put your client to ease, develop a confidence in him, win his confidence or her confidence, that everything will be confidential. Slowly talk over to them, and when they feel comfortable with you, they will open up and they will tell you what their problems are. There has to be an eye-to-eye contact. When the person is talking to you, you can't look away, you can't answer your phones, you can't go on scribbling something on the paper, because you have to be attentive to listen to their story or the problem. Your body language is very, very important. And the information that you are going to give, that is also important. So we have to be fully prepared with the information. So these are some simple counseling techniques with which every family physician can be the best counselor for these people. So newlywed couples, you are a family physician, you know the family, you know the girl or boy, the girl or the boy who are going to get married. So after the marriage, please tell them that come for a counseling session. Then what do? We get on with our job. We take a clinical history in detail. As I said, history about consanguinity, history about familial disorders, any other medical history. So take a clinical history in detail. Take the menstrual history of the woman. Talk about sexual relations in presence of both of them. Take history about family disorders. And after taking a detailed medical history, carry out a detailed clinical examination. Please do not assume or presume things. The person has walked in, looks healthy, comfortable, and therefore there is no organic lesion. It is not 100% correct. I'll just give you my own experience. Again, I remember all these stories. There are so many, but I'll just quote one. I was a medicine registrar. And a girl 1 year senior to me, she was a gynec registrar. She was a very good looking, very fair girl. She was little on the obese side. She had an intercaste marriage and therefore interreligion, I would say. And therefore there was no support from either side to her. She was living in the hostel. Her husband was working somewhere here only in Bombay. And then she conceived. So she broke this news to us. We all were happy. We were even planning baby shower and all for her in the hostel. And everything was going on very smoothly. It was 6th or 7th month of pregnancy and she developed edema feet. She was consulting one of the best gynecologists of the city, whose registrar, she was working as a registrar with him in Jeju Hospital. So we were all bindas, ki, theek hai, everything is going on very well. And she developed little edema in the 6th or 7th month, second trimester. So naturally, all investigations for pre-eclampsia were done, they were negative. Then her gynecologist said, "Arey fatso, you must be diabetic, get your blood sugar done." And because I was a medicine registrar, I remember 3 times I have done her glucose tolerance test, because those days there was no HbA1c, so only fasting PP was not enough, particularly in pregnancy. So GTT, 5 pricks every time, 3 times GTT was absolutely normal. In this, at the end of the 7th month, once she walked into my room and she said, "Alka, I'm getting little breathless. I don't know why. Will you please examine my chest?" So I say, "Okay." And it was in the hostel room that I examined her. First, I thought it may be anemia, or it may be because of her overweight that she is feeling breathless. When I examined her, my God, I was really taken aback. She had a tight mitral stenosis and she was in congestive cardiac failure. Because she was so healthy, she was so happy, and she was fat, so nobody could ever, and she never had any cardiac symptoms. And it was very difficult for me to break this news. And before breaking that, I wanted to confirm that, Baba, I am correct, because those days there was no echocardiography or anything. So I just told her politely, "I think there is some murmur, maybe a hemic murmur. So tomorrow you come to my ward, we will do the CBC and I'll show you to my boss." And before that, I had informed my boss that such and such thing has happened. Will you please examine her? And when he examined her, the same thing. She had a tight mitral stenosis and she was in failure. This was 7th month, which was ending. And we did not have those days, balloon valvotomies and other things. Fortunately, she was under medical care. The gynecologist profusely apologized her because he had not examined her. She also was very surprised because she said, "Arey, recently I went to Kashmir. We went and we enjoyed Kashmir. I was doing horse riding. I was doing this. I was doing that." And she never had a breathlessness, but she decompensated during pregnancy. So we can miss these lesions. ASD, as I said, can remain asymptomatic for a very long period, and therefore please do detailed clinical examination. There may be a lymph node somewhere and it could be tuberculous. So please examine the patient in detail when the patients come for preconception counseling, and that is exactly the significance of preconception counseling. And then we do the investigation. So preconception screening of prospective parents, both the partners have to undergo these tests. These are simple tests like CBC. The mother may be anemic. We take it for granted. Hemoglobin 9 is normal in Indian women. No, it is not normal because it puts a lot of stress on the mother during pregnancy. Second thing, remember that in a woman, when we see anemia, we always say iron deficiency anemia. But of late, I am seeing a large number of our people who are either vegetarians or they eat non-veg very occasionally, once in blue moon. They are B12 deficient also. So please, when you see there is anemia, then please do their ferritin levels, iron levels, and serum B12 folic acid levels. And based on that, give them the treatment. Now, if the hemoglobin is, in spite of treatment, remaining between 9 and 10, it is not responding, it is, not responding to the hematinics, then think of one of those hemoglobinopathies. Palpate again for a splenomegaly. It could be a sickle cell trait or thalassemia trait, and therefore please be observant about CBC. Do the blood groups of both the partners in order to detect Rh incompatibility, which can be treated today. Urine examination, X-ray chest, VDRL, yes, we have to do. HIV 1 and 2. Now, it is a government guidelines which says the test you do the counseling of each and every pregnant mother, but test her for HIV 1 and 2. Because if she is positive, we can treat her and at least prevent mother-to-child transmission. The same thing is true about hepatitis B. So HBs, AG antigen, most of these people remain asymptomatic. If the husband is positive, then the woman has to be protected by giving hepatitis B vaccine. If woman is HBsAg or Australia antigen positive, the husband is to be protected by giving hepatitis B vaccine. And if the woman is HBsAg positive, either, now there is a treatment for hepatitis B, or we have to also be prepared to treat the neonate. As soon as he is born, we can give the immunoglobulins. Test for anti-HCV antibodies, blood sugar, fasting PP, and HbA1c, so that we know, tomorrow when we face a problem with gestational diabetes, we have to know that she was not diabetic, her sugars were normal. Serum creatinine, then thyroid functions. Now T3 and T4 are, when I discuss thyroid, I'll discuss this in detail. But when you are doing this in prospective parents, then do free T3, free T4 and TSH. At the same time, you can do pelvic UHG of the woman in order to see that the anatomy is proper. Sometimes you can detect some ovarian cysts, sometimes you can see a bicornuate uterus or other anomalies, or there is a fluid in the pouch of Douglas, there could be pelvic infection, and therefore UHG, pelvic UHG in a woman. Now when we are subjecting women for this, we have to also do semen analysis of the husband. Now 2D echo, if there is no indication, or if you are very sure that there is no murmur, there is no congenital or valvular heart disease, you may defer it. But I would suggest that if possible, if feasible, please get 2D echo done, because postpartum myocarditis and cardiomyopathy is rising. And therefore, if before the pregnancy, if there was no evidence of cardiomyopathy or the ejection fraction was absolutely normal, then we can make a diagnosis after the pregnancy of the cardiomyopathy. So please do the 2D echo. If the hemoglobin is not responding, or if there is a family history or consanguineous marriage, then hemoglobin electrophoresis for hemoglobinopathies. And anti-Mullerian hormone. Now this hormone depicts the ovarian reserve. As I told you, every woman is born with a certain number of ova, so certain number of menstrual cycles. So this anti-Mullerian hormone tells the ovarian reserve, or what will be her fertility sort of index. But it is not 100% error proof, and therefore there may be a low AMH and still the woman conceives. So I would defer it if the person, unless the person comes for infertility. In a normal situation, I may not do it because it only adds to the anxiety of the couple. So AMH I will reserve. If they are not conceiving, then this will be when we approach to a infertile couple. So this is the significance that why we have to do a preconception counseling. We have to screen the couple, and then they can go for conception. Talking a little about vaccination. Vaccinations, which vaccinations can be given during pregnancy? Now when we are talking about pregnancy, we are giving vaccine to protect the mother, but also to protect the child. Also to see that this vaccine doesn't have deleterious effect on the child, and therefore the safety of the vaccine is very, very important. Vaccines consisting of toxoids, killed bacteria, killed viruses can be given during pregnancy. Vaccines consisting with attenuated viruses, that means these are live viruses. Okay? So live attenuated viruses such as mumps, measles, rubella are contraindicated during pregnancy. So also vaccine for yellow fever wherever it is endemic. Nowadays this MMR and even hepatitis B vaccine is included in pediatric immunization program, IIP program. But little older ladies or girls may not have received MMR, and therefore we have to consider whether that is to be given now. Vaccination during pregnancy, which can give during pregnancy, I am talking. Hepatitis A vaccine, it is produced from inactivated virus. Theoretically, risk to the fetus is low. See the word cautiously used. theoretical risk to the fetus is low, but that means, we are taking some risk, and therefore if there is a problem with the potable water, it is better to give hepatitis A vaccine before the conception. Hepatitis B, again it is a recombinant DNA, and therefore there is no risk, can be given during pregnancy. But if we know that it is HBs AG positive partners, then we can give them preconception. MMR is not to be administered during pregnancy. Varicella not to be administered during pregnancy. BCG is not recommended during pregnancy. So, which vaccination we can give in preconception counseling? We can give them typhoid vaccine if you think it is necessary, hepatitis A vaccine, hepatitis B vaccine if husband, hepatitis B if husband is HBsAg negative and the wife is positive. H1N1. Now H1N1, WHO has declared that the epidemic is over, but we are still getting sporadic cases in Pune and the roundabout area. There is a monovalent vaccine which is only for H1N1, and there is a polyvalent vaccine H1N1, H3N2 and influenza. We will discuss more in details about this vaccine when we are going to discuss infections during pregnancy. Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to have a dialogue with you. Thank you.
So, insights into fertility history taking and tests. A family physician has to develop a good way of talking to the patient who comes to them, either to say that, doc, we have been married for 4 years, we have been following contraception, now we want to try, or we are trying. Now, as ma'am said, today's youth, they get married late, they get children late. But another characteristic of today's generation is they want early gratification. ये काम किया तो result अभी मिलना चाहिए. And then if they try having a baby, they have unprotected sex for 3 months, and if they don't conceive, the panic starts. And then they come and they say, doc, 3 months over and we are not getting. That is the time that you have to look at their age, take a proper history and decide that they should be doing workup now or they can wait. So infertility actually is the inability to conceive after 1 or 2 years of regular unprotected sexual activity. Regular is a very important word. Many a time couples come to me, and when I ask them what is the frequency of intercourse, they look at each other and they say maybe 3 times a month. Now that 3 times a month, if it is not going in that period around ovulation, you can be sure that they will never conceive. So we have to ask the frequency of intercourse, and we have to ask certain habits. That is why I'm saying a family physician of both genders has to be very sensitive in asking sensitive information. There was a couple who were both normal, but soon after intercourse, the lady will rush to the bathroom and wash herself with the douche. So she was actually removing all the semen from her vagina. Fertility is not an absolute definable quality. Like you can measure blood temperature, body temperature, blood pressure, blood sugar. You can't measure fertility. In a group of women with uniformly normal fertility, many do have to wait a long before they achieve pregnancy. Incidence of infertility age-wise at 25% is 7% only 25 years, and at 40 years as high as 32%. Infertility is primary, where conception has never occurred. Many times a doctor can get fooled. A couple comes for infertility, and later you realize that one of the partners has already had a conception with another partner in past, either the girl or the boy. Secondary conception is acquired, secondary infertility is acquired where once a child has occurred or once a child pregnancy occurred, there was a spontaneous abortion and then they cannot conceive again. In the Indian society, female partner is generally blamed for infertility and faces social wrath. Even in the concept of DINK is double income, no kids. I have a patient, rather I have several couples. So I asked this boy who came to me once, I said, Abhi, Pradeep, how long since you are married? Sir, 5 years. So why you are not planning a family? So he said, good you ask me, but never ask this question in front of my wife because she only agreed to marry me when I convinced her that we will never have children. Infertility still does lead to unhappiness and marital disharmony, which may even end in divorce. It's a simple mathematical inevitability. How long does it take to get pregnant? When should we or patients begin to worry? We will see this. Now understand one thing, which is a very important fact. All of us have had our share of patients who conceived, the girl who conceived premaritally. And then they come and tell you, Doc, we just had once intercourse and then she conceived. And later on, this factor I use when I talk to my patients who have been attempting, somebody trying for a child for 6 months. So my question to them is, okay, tell me, when you are having intercourse, are you enjoying sex or are you thinking, will this be successful? Will this be successful? And both of them say, no, we are actually wondering, will this be successful? Now that is a negative emotion. Why even one act of intercourse leads to pregnancy premaritally? Because both the partners are in full super mood. Everybody's heard of endorphins. Good hormones help pregnancy, bad hormones help infertility or reduce fertility. So if the couple is thinking of all this, no, they are not even enjoying sex, it is mechanical. Oh, today's 11th day, let's have sex. Today's 12th day, let's have sex. Then you are sure that pregnancy will not occur. To evaluate the status of fertility or to rule out individual causes of infertility, one must understand the necessary prerequisites for conception. Testes must produce healthy motile sperm. So sperm is to be produced, it has to travel through vas deferens, mix with the prostatic fluid and be ejaculated and survive all of this. This is the whole cycle of how fertility occurs. The arrow is the sperm. The sperm has to enter the vagina, pass the cervical mucus, enter the uterine cavity, go through one of the tubal ends into the tube. Ovum has to be formed. The ovary has to produce ovum, which has to be picked up by the fimbrial end of the tube, and then through the movement of the cilia, it travels along the tube till it reaches certain level. Ovum is moved by the cilia, sperm is moving on its own. When this sperm fertilizes the ovum, this ovum has to then come back and get implanted somewhere in the uterus. For all of this, we need several factors. And let us look at those factors, how we can help them evaluate. As I said, sperm must be deposited at the external os through satisfactory intercourse. This has to be transported through cervical mucus. Cervical mucus is a very, very important part of fertility. Uterine cavity and the fallopian tubes. The ovary must produce healthy ovum by ovulation, and ovum should be picked up by the fallopian tube. Fertilization must occur in the tubal lumen, and the fertilized egg is transported through the tube to be implanted on the primed and healthy endometrium. When do we worry? Let's understand what is the probability in any given month of a normal fertile couple achieving pregnancy. So if both the partners are absolutely normal, all investigations normal, the probability of a normal fertile couple achieving pregnancy in any given month is 20%. You will say that is low. This I am talking of everyday intercourse. It is low because the nature has made like that. Otherwise, we will have no place to stand on this earth. With unprotected intercourse, about 90% of normally fertile couples will conceive within 1 year. Therefore, no couple should be subjected to rigors of infertility workup or referral to a gynecologist until they have really tried to conceive for 1 year without success. This I am talking of both the couples below 30, no medical ailment, and examination normal. If history or examination reveals some obvious defect in either partner or obvious sexual dysfunction, not able to have proper intercourse, not able to ejaculate or anything else, or female with the anovulatory cycles, then we need not wait that long. Modern couple-friendly approach to infertility, diagnosis and management by family physician involves inexpensive and less invasive tests first, then to proceed further or refer. Today, the patient needs a level of comfort with the doctor. And I think that couple-friendly approach you have to give the patient and the couple patient. Please give some extra time to them. Don't make them talk to you over 2 to 3 minutes and give decisions. Causes: physiological infertility before puberty, after menopause, during pregnancy, and during lactation is questionable. We have millions of babies are born during lactation because sometimes ovulation does occur during lactation. Male factor and female factor. The physiological part is because of anovulation. There is no ovulation occurring. Many times it will be seen that the male is reluctant to undergo test. For them, if they are able to have normal sex, ejaculate normally, they feel they are normal. But insist on both being tested together, because for a female there are several factors. I have the vaginal factor, I have the cervical factor, I have the tubal factor, I have the endometrial factor, I have the hormonal factor. For the male, it is one semen analysis. Then for a female, I get 12 menstrual cycles in a year. So I have 12 stations to investigate a woman. But one cycle of spermatogenesis takes 3 months. So if I see a patient semen analysis today, I find something negative, I treat for it, then I can only retest after 3 months. So I get only 4 chances in a man. So insist, otherwise say I am not getting involved in both of you. Record complete medical and reproductive history. Any infections, major infections, any long-term treatment had in past, especially the woman, if they had a tuberculosis in past, because for all you know, with a pulmonary tuberculosis, she also had genital tuberculosis and may be having fallopian tube block. For the man and woman both, ask history of mumps, because mumps in a boy would have led to mump orchitis, leading to 0 sperms, or a mump ovarian inflammation, or oophorytis. Menstrual history with detail with reference to regularity, length of the period, how regular, how many days does the period last, what is the flow, and pain. Do you get pain during menstruation, before or during? Past history including contraception, any lubricants being used. If you forget to ask of lubrication, Many of the lubricants used are spermicidal. So all your attempts at making them conceive would fail if you're not inquired about lubricants. Any induced or spontaneous abortion in past, any stillbirth, previous conception with other partner, this is a very sensitive task. How can you ask? You can only ask when you talk to them alone. Identify any element in either partner that contradicts pregnancy. That okay, you should not conceive. Let's look at semen analysis. Sperm count. What is the count? Ultimately, we need one sperm to fertilize the ovum. This is the WHO reference range. Total sperm count in ejaculate 39 to 928 million. Volume should be 1.5 to 7.6 ml. Concentration 15 to 259 million per ml. It is said that up to 20 million healthy sperms conception is possible. Total motility, progressive, non-progressive, and sperm morphology, how many sperms are abnormal. Then the quality of the sample. Let's understand something about the quality of the semen that has been given. Volume, consistency, and liquefaction. Now, ideally, the sample should be produced in the lab only. Do not allow to carry from home, because you don't know how fast the people will reach the lab. Secondly, please never store semen in a refrigerator, because we all think, no, fridge is the best thing to store. If it is to be transported to the lab, please find out the lab should be not more than 10-15 minutes away. The person has to put the container in the back pocket so that the body warmth is there, the sample remains warm. Now, within a minute of ejaculation, the semen should normally turn into gel known as clumping. The sperm cannot be adequately counted or examined while the semen is in this state. The main function of clumping is that soon after the man withdraws, the semen should not drain out of the vagina. So this clumping, a gel-like thing, is formed by nature. Within 10 to 30 minutes after ejaculation, the blob should ideally liquefy. So when you read a report of semen analysis, see the consistency and see liquefaction time, which should be around 30 minutes. After that, motility, having a good sperm count is of no use till you have a good motility. As I told you before, the ovum is transported through cilia, but a sperm moves on its own. So motility is forward progressive. Now, before we talk more of motility, the only complex function of semen is to deliver sperm directly to the cervix. You know, sperm, the vaginal pH is acidic, we all know. The sperm survives in alkaline pH of the semen, and it has to travel very fast to the mucus. Once it enters the cervical mucus, the acidic pH of the vagina cannot anymore destroy it, and the sperm is safe. Semen's alkalinity protects against the acidic medium of vagina. Forward progressive motility, we must have at least 40% of forward progressive motility. There is non-progressive motility. They are swimming in mostly straight line or in very large circles. Total motility is about whatever percentage, but we only are interested in forward progressive, because as we saw, the sperm has to travel from the cervix inside the tube and fertilize. Forward progressive motility is needed for the sperm to swim their way up the female reproductive tract. Then energy. In the semen report, there is a test called fructose. Fructose should be present. For the sperm to do this forward movement so rapidly, it requires energy. and this energy is provided by fructose. So if you have a fructose absent, then there is serious problem because this sperm cannot move. Then the patient has to be recommended for IVF. Sugar provides instant energy for rapid movement. And then abnormal forms, up to 20 to 30% of abnormal forms are accepted. So if you have a total count of say 30 million per ml and you have 40% abnormal, you can straight away reduce the numbers and come up the actual count. And lastly, white cells in the semen suggest infection. Then you have to treat that infection either by antibiotics or whatever way, depending on what type of infection you see. If the semen count is very low, other test in the male semen analysis, if the count is low and your examination has shown a varicocele, then you have to get the varicocele operated, wait for 6 months for the sperm count to improve. For female doctors who cannot do a scrotal examination, I suggest that you ask for a scrotal ultrasound to pick up any varicocele of the patient. If this ultrasound Doppler, varicocele and hydrocele, many times small hydroceles cannot be palpated, and then that may be leading to low sperm count. If you see zero sperm count, azoospermia, 2 samples at least, then earlier we used to do testicular biopsy, but before that you should do FSH test. FSH in the range of 100 in a male with a zero sperm count suggests premature testicular failure, and nothing much can be done. If they are keen on the pregnancy, then they have to look at artificial insemination donor and ultimately testicular biopsy. Postcoital test is done just to examine the cervical mucus. It is done for both partners. Soon after intercourse, the female is examined to see whether sperms are surviving or not, what is the status of the cervical mucus. Insights into female factors. Ovulation. First, I have to make sure that ovulation has occurred. So my first thing for a female patient is a hormonal profile and ovulation profile of ultrasound. Ovulation profile is done by the sonologist starting from say day 10 to about day 17 till the egg actually ruptures. We take a menstrual history, how regular are the cycles, and then depending on that we ask for USG ovulation profile. Earlier time we used to do basal body temperature, but nowadays it is not followed so much because now we have a better way of USG. Basal body temperature was an indication of ovulation, but ovulation profile actually is an evidence that ovulation has occurred and it has ruptured follicle. Follicle is ruptured. Cervical mucus, again nowadays even gynecologists do not try to do lot of examination, intervention. So this is only done when the cases are not responding to treatment. Hormones, what hormones we do? FSH. The levels are different based whether the patient is in follicular phase, mid-cycle peak, luteal phase, pregnant or postmenopausal. You should always ask it around 7th day, 5th or 7th day of the menstrual cycle. LH is a luteinizing hormone which causes a mid-cycle peak, and this is the peak that helps the follicle to rupture and release the ovum. Then we do prolactin at times just to rule out that prolactin is normal. And then we do TSH to make sure that the thyroid function is normal, there is no thyroid dysfunction, because that may affect other hormones also. Menstrual disorders which commonly can give problem: dysfunction, uterine bleeding, excessive bleeding, more flow lasting for more days, then definitely the hormones are affected. It is due to hormonal derangement if the ultrasound does not show a fibroid. Polycystic ovarian syndrome or polycystic ovarian disease, PCOS or PCOD, if you have a patient who has irregular periods, they are unovulatory cycles, steady not producing ovum. In these patients, pregnancy is a tricky thing and you have to maintain that very well. Premenstrual syndrome, we don't need to do any hormonal test. This gets relieved by a high dose of folic acid and B12, B6, pyridoxine and folic acid. You get very good results in a 3-month course. The brand names are B-Long and Pyricontin. PCOS definition, Sten and Leventhal said association of amenorrhea with polycystic ovaries and variably hirsutism and or obesity. But in practice we have seen and or obesity, they are largely obese or stocky and many of them have hirsutism. And Association of American Council of Obs and Gynec and National Institute of Health is hyperandrogenism and chronic anovulation leading to chronic amenorrhea when other causes are excluded. 33% of women are obese, 8% have type 2 diabetes, 27 have anovulatory fertility. Of all the infertility cases, 27% are anovulatory infertility, and these all are hallmarks of polycystic ovarian syndrome. 5 to 10% of reproductive age. 4 to 6% worldwide. 75% of women with irregularity or irregularity of menstruation or infertility. Signs and symptoms: menstrual irregularity, irregularly irregular. This patient on history taking will tell you, sir, वो period का मन होता है तभी आता है. I cannot predict it. Hirsutism, acne, infertility, male factor, we have to see what is it, and obesity. Signs: hirsutism, acne, obesity, acanthosis nigricans, because PCOS has a strong link with diabetes. A PCOS patient, if you ask history, father or brother is likely to have diabetes and male pattern baldness. So if you see this patient behind the neck, they will have dark lines. This is showing that they are having insulin resistance, very likely to become pre-diabetic soon and later diabetic. You do ultrasound, you see ovarian enlargement with multiple polycystic thing. Male fat distribution. A patient with irregular periods comes with hips which are narrower than shoulders. In India, female distribution of fat is hips are wider than shoulders. If you have wide hips, you can almost be sure that she is PCOS or PCOD. Breast development out of proportion to physique. How do you diagnose? LH to FSH ratio is more than 2, likely to be PCOS. LH to FSH more than 4 is confirmed PCOS. You can do this test and then you can get a double confirmation by doing a sonography. So LH to FSH ratio more than 4 is a diagnostic thing of PCOS. Now the treatment differs. Actually, it's a big thing. If the patient is unmarried or does not kid, I don't have to worry. I have to give her a progesterone for withdrawal bleed, because if she remains 45 days, more than 45 days without a period, then estrogen alone can keep harming her body. So I must give her a progesterone withdrawal every 45 days. Commonest we use is Devry 10 milligram, and she gets a withdrawal bleed. I am not concerned of she not getting period. I am concerned of not having progesterone. Married desires kids, we give clomiphene citrate, which gives follicles and then increases FSH, and she gets a ovum and chances of conception are higher. Ultrasound will show like this, smooth surface, lack of ovulation. Tubal factor, as we saw, the ovum has to get transported through the tube. One is salpingography. Second is a laparoscopy with tubal insufflation, injecting either a dye or air. For tubal factor, your history taking is important. I have had at least 3 patients in my 40-year plus practice where they underwent first MTP because either they had a pregnancy before marriage or soon after marriage, accidental, and you know the concept of we want to enjoy life, and then they never had another child. So you have to ask if any abortion was done, spontaneous or whatever, because it could have blocked the tubes. If you are advising any patient of yours to undergo MTP for their first pregnancy, talk to them that there is a small chance that you may not conceive again. And just talk to the gynecologist who is conducting MTP that is she or he using prostaglandins, because use of prostaglandins during MTP activity reduces the chances of tubal block in future. Then any history of tuberculosis, but otherwise tubes generally remain patent. Then vaginal factor, as I told you, pH, it is acidic pH. If the patient has chronic vaginitis, then the pH increases further. So all vaginitis should be treated before they start planning a PV. And somehow, if the thing is very acidic, I don't know how it works, but giving them oral probiotics helps the vaginal flora also. Cervical mucus, which can only be checked by the gynecologist if the mucus is enough and enough consistency. Uterine factor, implantation, endometrium should be a minimum of 7 millimeter. Otherwise, if the endometrium is not 7 millimeter, then even IVF will not be successful. 7 millimeter and above endometrium is primed for implantation of the fertilized ovum. So what are the tests we do? Female fertility panel, CBC blood group, FT3, FT4, TSH, fasting sugar, HIV, HbSAg, HCV, VDRL, FSH, LH, prolactin, testosterone, sperm antibody. Many times due to an autoimmune disorder, they develop sperm antibody and all the sperms are killed. Anti-Mullerian hormone, as ma'am said, you may not do initially. If you're just doing a workup to tell them, oh, you are fertile, you may not do AMH, but anyone coming to you in early 30s, please check AMH. 2D echo, as we said, that if the patient is affording or you can hear a murmur, if you are so confident that, okay, I am auscultating, there is no murmur, leave it alone. Otherwise, before you do everything else, 2D echo should be done. Anti-Mullerian hormone secreted by cells in developing follicles. The level of AMH in a woman's blood is generally a good indicator of her ovarian reserve. It can be evaluated any time of the month. It does not change with the menstrual period. Even when the patient is on OCP, then it can be done still. Low AMH is treated with DHA, dehydroepiandrosterone. Recommended dose is DHA 25 mg TDS, total of 75 milligrams for 3 to 4 months. Many times, if the patient is undergoing IVF, the gynecologist will give DHA at least 1 month before to increase the ovarian reserve. Some people who don't want hormones even get some improvement with omega-3 fatty acids. Torch is a very important test. This should be done when a patient who has a precious pregnancy, or if is at the age of 30, as soon as they conceive, you should do TORCH. TORCH does IgM, IgG of each of toxoplasmosis, rubella, cytomegalovirus, herpes 1, herpes 2. Now, if you have a patient who you are just working up, they just want to see, doc, we just want to see we are normal, then you need not do TORCH, but always do rubella IgG. Because rubella, actually all of these infections are silent infections, and they are the commonest causes of abortion and fetal malformations. If you're doing nothing else, just do a rubella IgG to confirm that your patient has immunity against rubella. And if the rubella IgG is negative, that is the time we recommend rubella vaccine, and then patient can start continuing the attempt to get conceived in a month's time. Otherwise, all of this to be done. And this is one more place where our counseling skills are required. When patient sees IgG positive, they get into a panic. So we have to explain to them, this is showing that you have protection against it. It is not showing that you have disease. And toxo is to be treated. Cytomegalovirus, if it is positive, we do not treat in non-immunocompromised patients, like only in HIV and all. When you have a CMV, colitis or eye affliction, we treat. Otherwise, we don't treat them. Herpes also we treat, but then we wait. And another place where, we have to be non-judgmental. You have a patient who's herpes positive, and then she says she has had genital herpes, then we don't want to be judgmental how she got and why not. Male fertility pattern, roughly the same. We have semen analysis added here, sperm antibody and scrotal USG to rule out varicocele. Okay, bye. Have a nice day.